In this next video for the payroll configuration section, we're going to talk about some initial preparation you should be doing and make sure is set up for employees, projects, and the general ledger module. There's a few things that need to be set up ahead of time before you can start getting into the payroll specific configuration. So one of the first things we're going to talk about is how to get an employee entered into the system initially. Now, typically with your deployment process in your discovery sessions with us, you've talked about, hey, where should we enter in employees initially? Should they be at top level, entity level? Typically best practices for this initial employee entry, it'll be at top level. But again, you should consult with your discovery session as far as how you guys determined it to be in those meetings. And again, if you're unsure of it, jump on a Q&A and we'll talk about it in more detail. But in my environment here, I'm going to be at top level. I do have multiple entities, and the company we're focusing on for payroll right now is the Timberline GC. So what's going to happen is at top level, the first thing that needs to happen is under the time module, we need to make sure the employee is set up. So again, this is where you're going to do that first employee setup. Now, initially, when we bring your data in and assist you in getting some of those master files built, we typically import this for you. And these can be imported, but more here to show you, hey, you got a new employee, it's one employee. It's going to be much less effort just to set it up from scratch than to try and import one employee. So here I can hit the plus button, or I can hit the employee list name here, and it will bring up the whole list of the existing employees. Okay. So what we're going to do here is I'll show you one that's already in the system, and then we'll create one real quick. So Robert Jones is already in the system. If I click edit, I can go into Robert Jones' file, and you can see here I have contact name. There's different various fields in here. We'll discuss the fields that you really need to make sure you have to get payroll working. One of the things you do not need here, and it's apparent if you have the payroll module, you do not need to list the social security number here. That will be done over in the payroll configuration for the employee. This would only be used for instances that do not and have not subscribed to the construction payroll. If you're doing payroll outside the system and you do want to store social security numbers in here, you can. They can be secured as well, but it's a lot easier to secure them over in payroll. So if you're watching these videos, that means you have the payroll module. So in this case, don't even bother filling out the social security number here. One less thing to worry about. As far as what's required and what you need, location. This is going to determine what company or entity this employee falls under. In this case, it's Timberline GC. Now it says Beaverton here for mine because I have child locations underneath my entities. And if I look at the Beaverton one here, I can click view and you'll see the Beaverton is tied to the parent Timberline GC. So that can be tied to locations that are tied to entities. That's critical. Another best practice setup for the employees is to put in departments. If you are using departments in Intacct, one of the areas that it can pre-fill in departments is from the employee setup here. So when we get into the workflow, you'll see if there's a department on the project, it'll use the project department. If there's no department on the project, it'll look here for the department. So if you're using departments, you definitely want to fill one in as a default department for each employee. Okay? If you're not using departments, it's not required, and you'll see there's no asterisk for it. Some of the other fields that are required, it's mainly going to be that information. It's going to be a contact. We'll show you how to get the address in when we set up the new individual. And ultimately, this tab is the tab that you'll be in. And you may not do this initially, but before we test the direct deposits, this is where the direct deposit information is stored in Intacct. It's under the reimbursement information tab. You'll see here up on top, you have a preferred payment method. So for your employees, you're either going to be set up as they receive a physical check, which is selecting check here, or they get a direct deposit file, which is going to be ACH or bank file. So it's going to be one of those two. And then if you elect to do a direct deposit file, you do need to make sure you check the enable ACH payments. And then basically, if your bank requires a particular file that doesn't meet the ACH standards, we also have this secondary method here called bank file payments. But basically, we're going to use that as needed. And when you get into your testing, if your bank rejects the file, you're going to be reaching out to us. We're going to go through that bank file process and how to set that up. There's also Ask Richard videos on that as well. But basically, once you say enable ACH payments, it's going to require you to put in that employee's bank routing number, account number, checking type, and account classification. Now, one thing to keep in mind here, just for some of those legacy users who could do this in the past, with Sage Intacct at this time of this video, you can only do one direct deposit account per employee. So if employees historically have been splitting their direct deposit files up into multiple files, savings, checking, they can no longer do that. You have to alert them early and make those changes because you only get one bank file. Okay. Initially, some clients do elect just to get the name and the address in and the location and worry about configuring, setting up the direct deposit information at a later point. In most cases, these can be imported as well. Okay. But again, from a new employee perspective, you can come in and just fill it out, be quicker. So just to set one up here, there's a couple ways to do that. You can just start from scratch and click add. Another time saver method is, for example, if the new employee you're setting up is in the same location as Robert Jones, has a lot of the same setup, you do have the capability of coming into here and pulling up that employee and click duplicate. And what's nice with that is it fills in some of the other information in the system, like location, department. They have employee positions filled out here. These are all optional fields that you can fill out. But all of that filled in, obviously you'd want to change and add a new name. You'd want to add a new birth date. And then, finish the reimbursement information. None of that comes over. So you can do that. That saves you some time. You can also just do it from scratch. You can click add. And notice I have a pre-numbering structure already set up in the system. So it's not asking me to label the employee ID. That again is part of your configuration that you've done prior. If you want to assign your own employee numbers, there is an option in the configuration to turn off the auto numbering. In this case, it's going to want a new contact name. So every employee gets a contact set up behind the scenes, and that's important to realize. I can't just type in the employee's name here and it'll set it up. Number one, you should always look to see if the employee already has a contact set up. And I would check first by last name and by first name. So for example, let's set up Josh Allen. So if I type in Allen, it'll show me if there's any Allens already in there, but I might want to also type in Josh just to make sure. It looks like that individual is not in there. So what I would want to do is just hit the drop-down list because you're going to have to anyways and click add. And once you do that, now you'll have the fields you'll need. You could put in last name, you can put in first name, email address, if you want to put an email address. Keep in mind, we're going to at some stage be able to set up a smart event for you that will alert the employee via email that their stubs are ready to view. By default, we set it up to look at this email. So sometimes people make this a personal email address versus a company email address. Up to you. We can also do custom fields that you can make. You can make this the company one and then have another one that we can pull off of. But it's up to you if you want to fill out this information. It's not required, but it will be required if you're going to send out stub notifications. So the critical field here is this suggested contact name. This is the field that it's going to use to appear on your pay stub and your check. There is also a print as field. It sounds like that's the field it would use, but it does not at this time. It uses the suggested contact name. You need to get this field correct. One of the things that it does do by default is it does pre-fill in last name first. Some people like to have it first name, then last name. You can edit that, but if you forget and you click save here, it hard codes that contact name in the system. And what you would have to then do is actually go and delete the contact out through the company area and then do it again. So make sure this suggested contact name is correct before you click the save button. And what it does is it'll also do this. If I say Josh Allen here, I mean, you can copy and paste. Okay. But for some reason, if it was Joshua, as soon as I change that here, it flips it back on you. So be careful of that. So any changes you make up here, you have to redo it down here. Okay. So we got suggested contact name, print as, I want it first name, then last name. And then the only other field you may be in here is, well, you're going to want to be in here is the mailing address. So you click on mailing, here's the address 1, city, state. You're going to want that because that's what's going to show up on your check stub as well. I'm going to leave it blank because I don't feel like typing it in right now. But you want to make sure those two are set up. Click save. That'll take you back to the main screen. It'll put in the contact name. You can track a start date. And like I said, you can pre-fill with full-time. You can put a birth date in, but not required. And then let's say we are going to use department, season operations, and the location is, we'll just say they're Beaverton as well. And you don't really need anything else here. There is some additional benefits to filling out things like employee positions and stuff like that. That'll be listed in other videos, like for time and material invoicing. You might want to have a particular billable pay rate based on if they're an estimator or engineer, so you can do some of that stuff. But payroll specific, the only other field you're going to need to go into is the reimbursement information. And let's just say, for time's sake, he's going to get a physical check. Okay. The one thing I would advise against is don't check off the send automatic payment notification. That will send an internal notification via email to the employee that they got a check, but it's very archaic and kind of, doesn't really show well as far as report goes. So leave this unchecked, because part of our deployment process is we're going to make sure you have a smart event set up that will send your own email out saying, hey, your pay stub's ready to be viewed. Here's the link, blah, blah, blah. We're going to be able to do that for you and with you. So don't check that off right now. And then cost rate, just to talk about it, this is more for if you're not using the payroll module. It's a way to get an average rate in and charge to a job. We're going to do actual, so leave all this blank. Now, if you want to fill it out to track history here, you surely can, but you're going to have that capability over in payroll as well. And then contacts. So if you did want to get back into the contact, you could see it here, or if you wanted to set up some additional contacts. So you can track things like emergency contact, forwarding. You can add more contacts here that are related to Josh. Okay, but if you want to get back in and see their address from this screen, the only way to do that is to either go into the contact here. Actually, I apologize. This is right here as well. I forgot about this. So down here, you can see the address right here as well. Perfect. But if you need to edit it, you need to get back into that contact. So you can hit the view button, and then you can hit the edit right there. So notice the one thing I can't change on an edit, contact name. So if you need to change that, we need to delete the contact and put it back in. Anything else can be changed. All right, so we'll go ahead and save that. And if you have any additional smart rules set up, you can actually have smart rules that says, hey, make sure this field is set up. You might get an error message there, and it'll remind you. So that employee is set up now. If I go and find that employee, it gave him the next number, which was 128. So that's how to go ahead and get an employee set up initially. Next thing you do want to make sure you have configured in the system is some initial project configuration that you should have done in some of the prior videos. Now, in a lot of cases, you may not set up projects yet because, if you're integrating with things like Procore and stuff like that, a lot of times they don't want the projects in because they'll bring them in initially. So you don't have to go in and set up all your projects. But what you are going to want to do eventually is set up some projects so that you can test payroll. And then basically when you're ready to do the live configuration, we'll probably just remove those projects if they need to be removed. But you should make sure you have a few projects set up in the system, especially before you're ready to test. On top of that, you also need cost codes and cost types. So That should happen most of the time naturally based on your deployment classes. You've taken the project courses ahead of time, ahead of this. You should have that already set up, but this is the time to confirm and make sure you do. So in the projects module, for the cost codes and cost types, you can check them at either the entity level or top level. I'm going to check them at top level here. And under projects, you'll see under setup, I have a standard cost code catalog. And so you should have your standard cost codes configured at this point. And inside these cost codes, this is going to look like your list. You'll see I have some cost codes that I'm probably going to use for payroll, like demolition, excavation, or whatnot. Inside those cost codes, you also want to make sure that if I click on it here, demolition, let's say, that there's cost types associated with them. And more importantly, any cost types that you may use for payroll. And you'll notice here I have labor burden, but for some reason my sample database doesn't have one I probably need, and that's the labor module. Now this is demo database, so these are going to be your list, but I'm guessing I probably want the LAB on here too, okay? Because when I go to code it, if I code to this cost code and then I get my list for cost types, I'm not going to see labor on this line item. So it's one of the biggest testing blocks is you don't have that job cost code cost type set up. So just kind of confirm that. You can add them on the fly. Sorry about that, I forgot. Billable and all. I'm just going to cancel it out for now. But you're going to want to set that up. On top of your standard cost code list, like I said, you have your standard cost type list. And you'll see here, these are going to be your specific cost types. Some people have labor one and a burden one. Some people have them broken out in regular overtime. You know, that's going to all be discussed in the discovery session and probably already pre-configured for you. In this series of videos, we're going to use the LAB. So we have those in there. The other thing now is we want to make sure we have some projects set up. Now, this can happen kind of later in the process where employee can't. You know, you really have to have the employees in there before you start payroll configuring. But the projects, just make note of it. And one of the things you're going to make sure you have in your system before we make the copy over the testing copy is that you have a few projects set up. Okay. So now typically, again, depends on your discovery session and your configuration. You may have projects set up at top level. You may have projects set up at entity level. Usually for multi-entity environment like this is, I'm going to want to be at entity level for my project list. So, hey, we're getting the Timberline GC company ready for payroll. So I want to look at my project list in Timberline GC. So I'll come over to here in projects and I'll just see what I got in there. And I do have a bunch of projects in here, so that's good. You know, you can set one up on the fly if you don't and just refer back to your project training videos on how to set those up. But one thing to check here is, let's say, you know what, we're going to use this project. We're going to use 22002 to test for payroll. So I want to see what cost codes are in here. So for this project, I don't need to go into the project. I can go over to the right here and I can click right on this cost code list here. And when I do that, it's going to show me here's the cost codes that are already tied to this project. So you can see I have several, so that's great. And I'm going to check some of the ones that I have labor on that I'm going to want to test. So let's just say, like, all right, I'm going to, and this, I haven't looked at this yet, so it might not be labor, but let's say we perform labor for the exterior improvements. Over on the right here, I can then go look at the cost types and make sure I have the labor cost type. And it looks like I picked a sub one. I knew I would do that. But basically any one of these that you're going to have labor on, you know, let's look at project and field management. That's probably a good one right here. You want to make sure your cost type has LAB. So if this one doesn't, let's say, hey, I want to make sure this does. So you can come right here and you can hit add. And you can say, I want to add the LAB. And it should let me save it. Okay, so now LAB is part of that cost code. So that's what you really want to make sure of. When you get into your testing stages, if you get errors like cost code doesn't exist or combination doesn't exist, that's probably what it means. when you're doing the testing, that is a lot of the errors because you're just doing selective jobs. You don't have everything ready at that point. So you just want to make sure that is ready. And once you have your project in there and you have some cost codes and cost types, that's now ready for payroll configuration for projects. And then last but not least, in your preparation for payroll configuration, we want to make sure we have a few general ledger accounts set up because you're going to need them in the next steps. So in that capacity, typically we're going to have your general ledger accounts set up at top level. But again, it's going to be company specific. So you're going to have to know where your general ledger accounts are set up. But if I go into top level here and I go over to general ledger, and I would just go right into all here and take a look at your general ledger accounts. So just click that list. So these are all my general ledger accounts. And you'll notice, you can get an idea of what you have going on here. This has already been pre-configured. Part of the payroll process is going to post into a payroll clearing account. And what we usually tell companies is just set up a separate one that you're just going to use for that. Sometimes people will use an account that they're using for other things like payroll accrual and stuff like that. What we would recommend, best practice, is set up a separate payroll clearing account because that should always be 0 at the end of the process. And so it's a lot easier to test and reconcile it if it doesn't have other entries in there. So you can do this a couple different ways. It's up to you. Talk to your accountant, talk to your CFO, whoever does the general ledger chart of account list. I would recommend just putting it underneath the cash account somewhere in there. Some people technically say, well, it's a liability technically, so I'm going to put it in the twos down here. But wherever you want to put it is up to you. What I would recommend is just hit add here. And actually, before I did that, I want to take a look at my gap and see, in this case, I'm going to call it 199999. So I have plenty of room here still for more accounts above it. So let's just hit add here and let's call it 19999. We'll call it payroll clearing account. And this is the debate. Is it a current liability? Is it a cash? I'm just going to put it under cash and cash equivalents because it's mimicking a cash account. And you don't really need anything else set up in here. You don't want to require anything on this side, but you may want to say disallow direct posting so that someone can't make an entry into this besides payroll. But I'm going to leave this off for now and just hit save. Okay, so that's important to make sure you have your payroll clearing set up in there. And where is my payroll clearing? Let me refresh that. Did I not set it up? Oh, my bad. I set that up wrong. I should have set that up. No, that's fine. I should have done 109999. But in any case, we do have it. It's right there, payroll clearing account. And that's ready to go for the next, we're going to get into that actually in the next configuration video. So you want to make sure you have a payroll clearing account set up. And then you want to get just some review on your payroll. And basically what I like to do here is, all right, how many levels of expense accounts are you doing? For example, are you using WIP for your labor? Are you using cost of sales for your labor, which is more typical? So if I go down here, sorry for scrolling too fast. I have, all right, if it's job related, it's going to cost of sales labor. But just get some eyes on that. All right, well, what happens if it's not job related? Do I have another expense account for overhead field? Do I have shop? Do I have yard? And you want to just kind of get all of those layers together because we're going to use them down the road. And it's going to help us determine how we do what we call our general ledger mapping. And we'll do this with you too in the live courses is we'll get a look at, all right, well, what other payroll accounts do you have? There's a service one here. So they have a service department. So there's service versus construction. So that's going to, and then there's right here, shop and warehouse wages, office wages. So we're going to kind of put all that together and just keep it in a list, and it'll help us figure out our geo mappings. This is also a time when, sometimes you want to consider consolidating. If you have like 20 payroll accounts for expenses, it's probably overkill. We can handle it in the coding of the departments and the jobs and things like that. So you can also think about consolidating your payroll expense accounts at this point too. But that's it. You just want to make sure that you're thinking about that. And also from the burden perspective, how do you expense your burden? Do you put it directly in cost of sales labor? Do you have another one called cost of sales labor burden for your admin or for your overhead? Do you break out expenses by tax? Or do you just have one called benefit expenses, tax expense, that type of thing? That's all going to come into play down the road in the GL mapping. So if you have a good understanding of what you want to do here at the beginning before you get into it, it'll make more sense when you get into the GL mapping.